Throughout the history of the United States, we've seen presidents who have led the nation through triumphs and tribulations, but who stands out as the most controversial, the most criticized, and perhaps the worst president in history? In this video, we delve into the decisions, the scandals, and the legacies that have left a lasting impact on the nation. Join us as we explore the presidency that many historians and citizens alike have debated over. Could it be someone you least expect? Stay tuned to find out. Number 8. Millard Fillmore, 1850 to 1853. Millard Fillmore, the 13th president, is perhaps best remembered for his role in passing the Compromise of 1850, a series of laws meant to ease tensions between slave and free states. However, the compromise included the Fugitive Slave Act, one of the most controversial laws in American history. The Fugitive Slave Act required that escaped slaves be returned to their owners, even if they were found in free states. This law infuriated abolitionists and deepened the divide between North and South. Fillmore's decision to sign the act into law made him deeply unpopular in the North and tarnished his legacy. While the Compromise of 1850 may have delayed the Civil War for a few years, it ultimately deepened the nation's divisions and placed Fillmore squarely in the history books as a president whose actions prolonged slavery's grip on America. Number 7. Herbert Hoover, 1929 to 1933. Herbert Hoover's presidency is inseparable from the Great Depression, the worst economic crisis in U.S. history. Hoover's belief in limited government intervention and self-reliance, while popular during the prosperity of the 1920s, proved disastrous in the face of widespread economic collapse. As unemployment skyrocketed and millions of Americans lost their homes, Hoover resisted calls for direct federal relief, believing that private charity and local governments could handle the crisis. His administration's refusal to provide adequate support for struggling Americans led to the creation of Hooverville's sprawling camps of homeless citizens living in squalor. By the time he left office, Hoover had become a symbol of government failure and indifference, paving the way for Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal, a radical shift in government policy that rejected Hoover's hands-off approach. Number 6. John Tyler, 1841 to 1845. John Tyler, who became president after Harrison's untimely death, was widely despised by both his own Whig Party and the opposition. Nicknamed His Excellency, Tyler's presidency was marked by political isolation and hostility from Congress. Tyler consistently vetoed key Whig policies, including a new national bank, leading to a full-scale revolt within his own party. His entire cabinet resigned in protest, and the Whigs formally expelled him from the party, making Tyler the first president to serve without a political party backing him. Despite his political failings, Tyler's presidency did establish one important precedent: the vice president, upon the death of the sitting president, would fully assume the office, with all its powers and duties. This rule of succession, though crucial, could not erase the deep unpopularity Tyler faced during his time in office. Number 5. William Henry Harrison, 1841. William Henry Harrison holds the dubious distinction of serving the shortest term of any U.S. president, just 30 days. His presidency was cut short by pneumonia, which he contracted after delivering the longest inaugural address in U.S. history in freezing weather, without a coat. Although Harrison's death was unfortunate, his brief time in office was marked by chaos and disorganization. At the time, it was common for citizens to visit the White House unannounced to ask for jobs, and Harrison found himself overwhelmed by the constant stream of office seekers. His inability to establish control over the executive branch left the government in disarray during his brief tenure. While he may not have had the opportunity to enact disastrous policies, Harrison's presidency is often remembered as an illustration of how unpreparedness and misfortune can define a leader's legacy. Number 4. Warren G. Harding, 1921 to 1923. Warren G. Harding came into office on a platform of returning the country to normalcy after the upheavals of World War I, but his short presidency is more remembered for scandal, corruption, and a lack of leadership. Harding himself admitted, "I am not fit for this office and should never have been here." While Harding was personally well-liked and charming, he surrounded himself with corrupt advisors and cronies who used their positions to enrich themselves at the expense of the American people. The most notorious scandal of his administration was the Teapot Dome affair, in which government oil reserves were secretly leased to private companies in exchange for bribes. Although Harding himself may not have directly profited from these schemes, his failure to oversee his cabinet or curb their abuses of power tarnished his presidency. He left office before the full extent of these scandals came to light, dying of a heart attack just 2 years into his term. His legacy, however, would be one of incompetence and unchecked corruption. Number 3. Franklin Pierce, 1853 to 1857. Franklin Pierce, the 14th president, believed passionately in the expansion of the United States, but his vision of manifest destiny came at a steep cost. A staunch supporter of national growth, Pierce's administration aggressively pursued the expansion of slavery into new territories, further polarizing the nation. Pierce's most damaging policy was his support for the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, which effectively nullified the Missouri Compromise by allowing settlers in those territories to decide for themselves whether to allow slavery. This decision led directly to violent clashes between pro-slavery and anti-slavery factions in what became known as Bleeding Kansas. Pierce's failure to address the rising tensions both within Congress and across the country left the nation more divided than ever before. His presidency not only paved the way for greater national discord, but also laid the groundwork for the Civil War. Despite his loyalty to the Democratic Party, even his own allies turned against him, denying him renomination in 1856. Number 2. Andrew Johnson, 1865 to 1869. Andrew Johnson took office after the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, inheriting a fractured nation in desperate need of healing. However, instead of continuing Lincoln's efforts to reunify the country and advance civil rights, Johnson openly resisted the Reconstruction policies designed to protect newly freed African Americans. His presidency was marked by a deep-seated racism and a constant clash with Congress over how to rebuild the South. Johnson vetoed landmark legislation, such as the Civil Rights Act of 1866 and the extension of the Freedmen's Bureau, both of which were designed to help former slaves transition to freedom. In an unprecedented move, Johnson became the first U.S. president to be impeached by the House of Representatives. His relentless obstruction of Reconstruction policies and refusal to work with Congress to address the needs of the South deepened the racial divides that would plague the nation for decades. Number 1. James Buchanan, 1857 to 1861. The 15th president, James Buchanan, inherited a nation on the verge of civil war. Though he recognized slavery as a moral evil, Buchanan believed that the institution would fade away on its own. This misguided assumption defined his presidency. Instead of taking decisive action to prevent the spread of slavery or address the growing tensions between North and South, Buchanan adopted a policy of inaction, effectively allowing the crisis to worsen. Buchanan's term saw the infamous Dred Scott decision, which ruled that African Americans were not citizens and had no rights. Instead of condemning the ruling, Buchanan supported it, further entrenching the institution of slavery in America. His refusal to challenge Southern pro-slavery interests, even as the country was heading toward disunion, earned him the derisive nickname Doughface, a Northern man with Southern sympathies. In his final months in office, as Southern states began to secede from the Union, Buchanan claimed that he had no constitutional power to stop them. This passive response laid the groundwork for the Civil War, making Buchanan's presidency a tragic failure in American history. These 8 presidents serve as a reminder that leadership is about more than holding office, it's about making the right decisions in times of crisis. From Buchanan's inaction to Hoover's failed economic policies, the choices these leaders made or didn't make left lasting scars on the nation. Their legacies remind us that the office of the president is one of the most powerful in the world, but it can also be one of the most dangerous when that power is misused.